Hello from Baguio. We also have an intern, Rick, who's also living in Baguio right now. Balak namin pumunta doon once the pandemic stops, hopefully for better weather. It's been quite hot, no, here in Manila, I noticed. And it's the medyo malagkit na init. I hope everyone's safe and at home. Yes, hump day already, no? But parang ang bilis actually ng June compared to other months this year so far. Hello from Taguig City. Yeah, okay, I think we can officially start right now. So just a reminder, you're here today joining us for the webinar entitled Creating Safe Spaces for Sensitivity and Diversity. And the reminders that I mentioned a while ago are here on the screen. Certificates and evaluations will be given in the chat box later at the end. Again, you will only have 30 minutes after the webinar to fill it up so that you can automatically get that certificate. Please make sure to write the correct name so that that's what will be accurately shown in your certificate. Please wait until the end of the webinar to get that. So we have some pahabol pa people in the room. Okay, so moving forward, just to introduce Positive Workplaces again, I think for those who are return fans, thank you for continuously supporting us. We're Positive Workplaces, and we really just want to co-create cultures that enhance the well-being of the Filipino workforce. And our free webinars every month is how we really give back to our community and how we allow other people to get that exposure as well. And specifically for this month, we're focusing on inclusivity and diversity. If you have some people who attended last week with Sir O'Neill, our webinar, I hope you can learn something new also within this session. So joining us today will be Mibo, Sir Ryan, and Ma'am Angelique. I've been so blessed to have two of them as my professors previously from Ateneo. So just to introduce them also. So Mibo is a licensed psychometrician. He is currently part of the University Gender Hub, providing counseling sessions to SOGI-related cases. He also helps provide workshops and interventions to various corporations, government units, and non-government organizations here in the Philippines. He gives clinical services to the public, such as brief psychological therapy and psychotherapy. Lastly, he is currently finishing his Master of Arts in Counseling Psychology degree at Ateneo de Manila University. Also joining us is Sir Ryan Camacho, who holds an MA in Social Psychology. He is a lecturer at the Department of Psychology in Ateneo as well. He teaches social psychology, and he was actually my prof in qualitative psych. So he's currently the training coordinator of the LS Gender Hub, and his current research interests are discourse analysis of political issues and episodes, gender-based issues, and critical masculinity. Also, someone who was my prof during this pandemic was Ma'am Angelique. I first interacted with her when I was trying to do a specific research, and she was so kind to accommodate me then, and she's doing the same now. She is currently a psychologist who holds an MA degree in counseling psychology in Ateneo de Manila University and is a lecturer in the department as well. She practices in Ateneo Bulatao Center and is the case response coordinator of the Loyola Schools Gender Hub. So all of them actually work with the Gender Hub. And today we'll be talking about three things. Why is it important to have a safe space, safe and inclusive workplace? What does it look like in a workplace that is inclusive? And how can we even create safe spaces for diverse communities? Right now, I'll pass on the screen to Sir Ryan to begin their presentation. So I hope everyone's hyped for today, high energy, react with the emoji if you're ready to start, maybe send the heart emoji. So let's be alive today. So sir, yay.
Okay, well, first, thank you for the introduction, Chloe. And I think we have around 7 to 7 people here with us today. So I would like to start the session by first thanking everyone for your time and effort to be here. And also I would like to just say that this month is June. Well, June is popular for being the most inclusive month. Maybe because we're actually celebrating Pride Month. We are trying to celebrate the uniqueness of everyone despite who they are. Diba? Acknowledging, being accepting, affirming there. And whether you are part of the LGBTQIA plus community or not, by celebrating this month, we are actually telling them that, giving them strength, and actually telling them that it's okay to be who you are. Okay, and for today's session, as the title says, we're going to discuss about creating safe space for sensitivity and diversity. And I believe before we even go there, it's important for us to discuss one related word or concept, which is inclusivity, before we could dive deeper into creating safe space for sensitivity and diversity. And now this session is divided into three parts. And here with me today is Ryan and Angelique, who would help me later on as we move forward. So the first part would be answering this question: why is it important to have safe and inclusive workplace? The second part would be, what does an inclusive workplace look like? Parang after knowing why is it important, let's try to somehow imagine what it would look like or how others are already doing it. So before we go to the how can we make safe space for a diverse community? Okay, so let's move on. So for us to touch base muna to see where you are right now in terms of your understanding with the term inclusivity, I believe Chloe and the rest of the Positive Workplace prepared the Mentipol. So there. So if I could ask everyone, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word inclusivity? Again, there is no right or wrong answers. We just really want to know where you are in the moment in terms of, understanding this word. So if you could go to menti.com and use the code 61750080, we would like to hear from you. Okay, getting some answers already. Diversity, no discrimination, for everyone. No one is left behind, right? Quality, walang iwanan. Yes. Sorry, I can see there. Okay, included. Everyone is accepted. Yes. No judgment. We're getting pretty good answers right now. Parang hindi na ata kailangan ng webinar na to. Okay, equality, acceptance. Okay, fair, community. Yes. Okay, justice for everyone. Togetherness. Okay. 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 Well, thank you for the answers. I think most of you are somehow already is familiar with the term inclusivity. Okay, so why don't we go back to our discussion and let's discuss more about it. Okay, so now let's discuss, or let's first define the word inclusivity. So if you could go to the next slide, in plain language, inclusivity means being open to everyone and not limited to certain people. Again, this is us acknowledging, accepting, affirming the presence of others, respecting different backgrounds and identities, whether they may be similar to us or not. As you mentioned a while ago in the Mentipol, walang iwanan, justice for all. Okay? Sige. Now, of course, we do acknowledge that inclusivity, diversity, and creating safe space can be applied to different settings. Okay. However, as we are coming from the LS Gender Hub, and our expertise lies on the discussion about gender and sexuality. So for today's session, we would like to focus the discussion on inclusivity, diversity, and sensitivity to where our expertise lies, if that's okay for everyone. So in the Gender Hub, we have this vision. We are trying to safeguard the well-being of all members of the LS community. And what we're trying to do now today for this session is trying to extend that vision to you who are listening today. Okay? And with that vision, we're trying to somehow to do three protocols, if you may say. So first, we're trying to be gender inclusive. This is us respecting self-identity, self-expression, diversity of gender and sexuality. It is us affirming the right of others for self-expression, that they don't need to ano ba, automatically ascribe to what the majority would say on how to act, how to behave. For example, females are allowed to wear baggy clothes. They're allowed to wear pants or cut their hair short. And it doesn't make them any less female than they are. It's just that how they express themselves. Okay? So the other one is we trying to be gender responsive through giving gender sensitive education or training so that we could parang somehow reach that gender equality and gender fair. Parang it is us trying to emphasize that nobody should be treated lower or higher just because of their gender or sexuality. So for example, at work, people should be ideally hired or sige, rejected based on their set of skills and not because of their gender or sexuality. Okay? And then lastly, we're trying to create again a gender safe environment for the community, right? Wherein we have free, parang the environment is free of sexual and gender-based violence, discrimination, and harassment. And as we go forward with the session, you'll know the effect of violence, discrimination, and harassment to the LGBTQIA plus community. Okay, and this vision of us is actually rooted from the core Ignatian principle, which basically means a faith that does justice for all. And if I could repeat myself again, the core Ignatian principle is a faith that does justice for all. And with this principle, we're trying to respect for diversity. Again, acknowledging that we are all coming from different beliefs and background in life, and what you offer is actually equally important compared to others, or us to others. Okay? And diversity is, you can say na, is what making parang living interesting by having unique identities. Okay? So next, we are also trying to respect for the integrity of the body, accepting, affirming the freedom of others to be who they are, giving them the avenue for personal freedom and to determine their own identities. They can carry themselves, they can change their bodies the way they want it to be. Okay? Then the next, we're trying to respect for human dignity. The only thing you need to have for you to gain respect is to be human. Nothing more, just you being a human. And everyone has a unique and special value because they are human. This is, again, despite of their race, socioeconomic status, educational attainment, gender, and sexuality. Okay? Okay. So we're basically trying to start off with the basics. And that basics would entail us discussing the overview of sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and sex characteristics. This is also for us to have a common language or understanding of the terminologies as we go along. And contrary to the popular belief, everyone in this room, and sige, even those outside of this room, has SOGI. Whether you are part of the LGBTQIA plus community or not, you have SOGI. And I hope na as I go forward with this overview, you can try to reflect, diba? What's your SOGI after? Sige. So we're trying to discuss the overview of SOGI using the gender unicorn. As with the gender unicorn, you can't really tell the gender of it, siguro. Or yeah, the gender is just like the unicorn. as the unicorn. Okay, and we're going to discuss each terminologies one by one. Now let's start with the biological sex. So biological sex is typically assigned by a medical professional at birth. They determine your sex assigned at birth based on the appearance of your genitals, organs, hormones, and chromosomes. Parang two, ano ba, for the lack of better term, parang popular sex would be male and female. But then again, there is already a growing body of research testifying for the presence of intersex. Intersex is a general term used to describe people who are born with biological components that does not fit the boxes of the typical male and female. Okay. The next one would be your gender identity. Gender identity is your internal sense of gender. It is how you think about yourself despite your sex assigned at birth. So for example, just to be open, I am assigned sige, female at birth, but then again, I don't really identify myself as such. Actually, my gender identity would be male or transgender male. So it could be different from your sex assigned at birth, and they don't have an automatic relationship. And some examples of gender identity would be, yes, woman, male, transgender man, transgender woman, non-binary. Non-binary people are those who do not identify to both genders, to male and female. There's also the binary, na bigender, na they both identify as male and female. And again, we don't see this concept as a binary concept. It is actually fluid. Now, we all have our feminine, masculine features. It's just that one aspect is more prominent than the other in some situations. Okay, so let's move forward. Next, we have our gender expression. Gender expression talks about how you carry yourself, again, despite your sex assigned at birth, and gender identity. Again, they don't have an automatic relationship. Now, you could identify as female and perhaps express your gender otherwise, di ba? Not totally ascribing to the parang feminine, parang the social expectation of being feminine. One example would be some, drag queens. Some drag queens are actually identified as cis male. They're males, but then again, there are moments that they enjoy expressing their feminine side. And that's okay. And for some parang for some drag queens as well, they say na parang we're living every day parang as a performance. Because every day we perform our identities, our unique, identities. Okay, one perfect example is Harry Styles too. Harry Styles parang identify as male, but of course, some of the show he would sometimes wear parang socially prescribed feminine clothes, and that's just how he express his gender. Again, rather than a binary concept, it is fluid. It lies in a continuum. Every one of us has a feminine and masculine feature. It's just that one is more prominent than the others in some situations. Okay? Sige. Next, sexual orientation talks about to whom you are attracted to physically, emotionally, or sexually. Again, it does not have an automatic relationship with your sex assigned at birth, gender identity, and gender expression. You can identify as female and be attracted to females. You can identify as male and be attracted to males. You can even identify as transgender man and be attracted to males, because they don't have necessarily an automatic relationship. It is how you, parang it is to whom you are attracted to despite your gender and their gender. Okay? So if we could go to the next slide, we'll talk about the different examples of SOGI. And I believe most of you are already familiar with the acronym LGBT. Okay, QIA plus community, and we'll talk about each terminology as we go along. So first, we have lesbian. This is the woman primarily attracted to woman. Okay, gay, man primarily attracted to men. Bisexual, a person attracted to one's own and another gender but not all genders. Parang, for example, you are female, then you are attracted to both male and female. Okay, and then transgender person's gender identity is different from their sex assigned at birth. Okay, next here, then sexual. Well, we strongly acknowledge, parang strongly encourage you not to use this term because this is generally an outdated term for persons who underwent surgical and hormone procedures for permanent gender change. Next, queer umbrella term for different identities that make up the LGBTQ communities. Questioning person is in the process of exploration for gender identity and expression. And I think it is important for me to say this in everyone that your SOGI, sexual orientation, gender identity is not parang set in stone. Meaning they could change, they could vary, but the variation or the change should not be forced upon us. It should not be changed because of the external pressure telling you to change. The variation or the change should come from within, the way you know yourself to be. Okay? Next, intersex. As we talked about earlier today, a person with sexual or biological components that do not fit the traditional markers for male and female. Okay? Ali, of course, non-queer person who supports the LGBTQI plus rights and a sexual person who generally does not feel sexual desire for any group of persons. Now, pansexual, lastly, person who experience attraction to another person from all gender groups. And now I believe we just talk about a lot of labels, terminologies. And for some people, it helps them to have such labels because especially if it describe their unique, I don't know, journey or experiences. But I also want to say to you, those who are listening today, na if you think that any of these labels, any of these terminologies does not serve you well, does not really accurately describe your unique journey, then you don't have to use them at all. Basically, you can just identify as you. Okay? So after having talked about that, different terminologies and labels, and I believe those are not parang easy terms to remember. Yeah, so now let's move forward to the section now. Why do we need to be concerned about these people, especially if we're not part of them in the first place? Okay, so I believe it is equally important for us to know about this if we're trying to create safe space for sensitivity and diversity. And here we found some Western data saying that 15 to 43% of LGBT workers have experienced discrimination in the workplace. Discrimination meaning unfair treatment. Siguro, for example, the opinions of others hold higher value compared to themselves just because of their gender and sexuality. And for some, they can be rejected for promotion only because of their gender and sexuality. Again, so other data would also say 8 to 17% of LGBT workers report being fired because of their sexual orientation and gender identity. Next, 10 to 28% of LGBT workers receive a negative performance evaluation, not because of their skills, but because of who they are. Next, 7 to 41% of LGBT workers were verbally or physically abused in their workplace. Now, I invite others to imagine living with this kind of scenarios wherein you have to go to work fearing discrimination, being negatively evaluated, being subjected to verbally or physical abuse, diba? By just imagining it, it can already be exhausted. And for the LGBT workers, one way that they can protect themselves is to hide their identities. Okay? And it doesn't make it easier for them actually. Parang Just imagine you can't really be, I don't know, be who you are as you interact with other people. And that adds another layer of stress to the already stressful situation. And again, I think it is important to take note that these data that we found are actually Western data. And we're trying to find some Filipino data, but we're somehow having a hard time with it. Siguro one conclusion that we made of that because parang meron pa rin lack of awareness to the existence of life of the Filipino LGBTQIA plus community and that their lives can have layering and difficulties which can affect both of their professional and personal life. Okay? And some might wonder, saan ba talaga nanggagaling yung problema? Bakit may discrimination? Bakit may mga rejection? Ba't may mga abuse? Baka dahil sa kanila because they do not ascribe to the social standards. And I don't know, this might intrigue you a bit, but actually the problem is social. Okay? Because the stigma and discrimination actually comes from the social. Again, discrimination would mean unfair treatment. Stigma is when people view the LGBT community or any other minorities negatively and even putting them in a disadvantage. By siguro one example would be being part of the LGBT community is equivalent to having mental disorder. That's again an outdated belief. And as like any other things that we have right now, which is progressing. For example, we used to have, I don't know, bulky computers. Now we have these thin laptops that actually make our lives much easier. Perhaps we can also have the same understanding that our gender and sexuality also evolves, our understanding of it also evolves, and actually the DSM-5 or the diagnostic criteria for mental health problems or difficulties have already removed like being part of the community as a mental disorder. Okay? And by continuing to stigmatize and discriminate the people from the community, we are actually telling them that we are rejecting you, that we do not accept you. Or if you don't change the way who you are, then you will continue to receive our rejection, our discrimination. Okay? Now, more things why we think the problem is social because there's a layers of rejection coming from the culture, religion, school, peers, and family. So if you could go to the next slide, then we can be more detailed of that. So with culture, there's this denial of rights, which is very evident, I guess. There's also the religious moralizing. God created only two genders. And if you don't ascribe to any of those two, then you're a sin. Then you have to change. Then then because of that, there's also bullying in school. And because of the bullying that some members of the community experience, they tend to isolate themselves from their peers to somehow protect themselves. And then, of course, family rejection. Okay, next. Again, some more research that's saying that in the workplace, most of the members of the LGBT community reported feeling scared of being true to themselves in the workplace because of the evident discrimination, rejection, fear of being negatively evaluated because of who you are and not because of your set of skills or your performance. And it's actually related to the Filipino data that we found that says that the stress that the LGBTQIA plus community feels may reflect expectations of discrimination as they interact with other people. Okay, and because of this, actually the LGBTQIA plus community, if you could go to the next slide, is at risk population for mental health issues. I do acknowledge that these days are very difficult for everyone. We're thinking about our finances, our job stability, our relationship with our family, our friends, and to others. And imagine having that and then top it up with you problematizing your identities or your sexualities just because others could not seem to be comfortable with it. And then no wonder why the LGBT community will be at risk for mental health issues. And LGBT youth are 4 times more likely, or even adults, to attempt suicide, experience suicidal thoughts, and engage in self harm. One explanation for this would be as children or as adults, the most member or some members of the community are used to these avoidance coping. Avoidance coping would be parang a form of coping mechanism to protect yourself from flying away from the dangerous or threatening situation. That's why a lot of people would remain in the closet because in the closet it is much safer. Kasi you don't need to experience discrimination, di ba? You don't need to experience rejection. But for some, they would sometimes carry it to the extreme, yung avoidance coping, na it would look like suicidal ideation. Kasi they want to escape such threatening life, such stressful situation, because again of the how people treat people from the LGBT community. Okay. LGBT people are 3 times more likely to experience a mental health condition. Yes. Next, here, LGBT people are 2.5 times more likely here for substance misuse. Some would say, some researchers would say that substance abuse or misuse is also a form of avoidance coping because substance abuse could make you feel elated, make you feel calm, instead of feeling the discrimination and rejection that you're already feeling. And there. So some numbers for the Philippine context. A UNDP report found experiences of discrimination vary among LGBTQI plus community, with transgender women reporting a higher level of discrimination. This is because most of us still hold masculinity as a higher being compared to women. And when a man tries to become a woman, then parang why do you like that when you already have this parang higher position in the society. And it also parang coming from the popular portrayal of transgender women or gays in the, I don't know, popular media, social media, na they only exist in, for example, in comedy bars, in parlors, diba? So, yeah. So next, economic and job insecurity was a very common experience among LGBTQI plus community, despite being more than half of the respondents having full-time jobs. Okay, next, and how else can the individual be affected by the social, especially in the workplace? It is when your workmates reject or demean someone, one, for being part of the LGBT community. Next, we also have, as we talked a while ago, history where homosexuality, bisexuality, and transgenderism were treated as a mental illness. Okay. Next, there's enforces unequal care. For some medical professional, meron pa rin na nagde-deny ng treatment for people coming from the community. Diba? There's this lack of training and understanding, lack of knowledge about the uniqueness of needs of the LGBT people, lack of sensitivity, and lack of care. Okay. Now, we just talk about why, parang the why of this session. Now we talk about the SOGI, the different terminologies, the LGBT community, and how the social can be a problem in terms of the varying experiences of these people. Now we'll try to talk about what does an inclusive workplace would look like if we consider their lives. And here with me today is Ryan, who would gladly guide you for this section. Take it away, Ryan.
Thank you so much, Mibo. And I hope that, the first part of our session really shows, the importance of why we're doing this, why we're here in the first place, I think Mibo did a really great job, just showing the why. All right. And if we were to summarize it, it is because of the experience of pervasive stigma and discrimination. An inclusive workplace does not have that. It does not have, or it could have that, but only at very minimal and sometimes accidental levels, which can be further reduced by training. So inclusive workplaces do not have these. But how do they go about doing it? And furthermore, what happens when a company or an organization starts to take in progressive systems, programs, and even practices in their workplaces? So organizations, companies, and even just small social or formal groups. I guess to summarize all of these questions, we are in part 2. Let's try to imagine what an inclusive workplace looks like. So of course, most of us here most if not all of us here are working people. Some of us are in the government, in companies, or even in non-governmental organizations. Some of us are working in schools. All right. Wherever we are, an inclusive workplace leads to better organizations. That's the simple answer. Okay. So diverse and inclusive workplaces are 21% more likely to experience above average profitability as a whole. Their financial performances are 35% higher than their national standards. On the contrary, workplaces that do not practice diversity and inclusivity systems and programs and practices have 25% lower financial performances. And then finally, these workplaces that are inclusive and diverse lead to better decision making, wider range of teamwork, and stronger innovation. So these have been findings from 2 McKinsey and Company studies and 1 Clover Pop study, which are organizational developmental companies. They're kind of big names with regards to exploring how companies can become much better, all right, in terms of their performance. So speaking of innovation, which is the last thing I mentioned when it comes to the performance boosts of a diverse and inclusive workplace, workplaces that are innovative reach a wider audience, all right? And they make people feel safe. And in this context, especially in the pandemic, people love to feel safe, and especially members of the LGBTQIA+ community. And those who innovate in order to reach these communities and make them feel safe are at an advantage because of their willingness and openness to innovate. All right. And these can be seen already in how so many companies and organizations try to reach out the best they can. So here are just some examples, all right, of innovation brought about by the acceptance of being inclusive of people, regardless of their gender, or respecting whatever their gender context is, basically. All right. And all of these are already being used by most of us. All right, and it's not just in the serious high level everyday products. Even in digital services and entertainment, we already see this similar trend. So in short, being a diverse and inclusive workplace will only do good for your organization or your company. And I'm sure everyone would love to hear that, no? And that's one of the main thrusts as to why we should pursue this line of thinking. But we want you to know that it is more than just all of this. It is more than just productivity as to why we are doing this. It is because, first and foremost, as shared by Mibo extensively, all right, there is stigma and discrimination. All right. So now our question again is what does an inclusive workplace look like? Well, to answer the question, an inclusive workplace counters the stigma directly. So simply not minding the stigma is actually damaging. You have to actively destigmatize through your programs, practices, and systems. You have to be saying to your to every work member that you are normal, you are healthy, and you are just like any other person. You have to counter discrimination actively. All right, discourage negative treatment of people because of their gender realities. All right. you as a company, as an organization, are a microcosm of society. So if you as a company or an organization through your programs say to someone, I accept you or I respect you because of your gender or for your gender, it's almost the same as saying, and it helps build the mindset that society accepts you and society respects you. All right. At the same time, an inclusive workplace gives tangible affirmation and validation. It doesn't work just to do it behind the scenes, giving secret support. Your support has to be visible because again, you will be part of a movement of a company as it shifts its paradigm from one of stigma and tolerance to one of tangible affirmation and validation. So again, through your programs, an inclusive workplace makes people feel that they deserve to be respected. They deserve to be loved. It is basically an organization that actively facilitates self-acceptance, affirms an LGBT member, most of all, no matter where they come from. And I say this because members of the LGBTQIA plus community come from all walks of life. All right. We have people from different SES levels. We have people from different regions of the Philippines. All right. Even different indigenous groups. All right. And even people from different races who are, living here in the Philippines, who will be part of your workplace, who will be interacting with you as an organization. And an organization that is inclusive and diverse affirms members of LGBTQIA plus community, regardless of where they come from. Of course, what I'm sharing with you now is basically some macro level visualizations. No, these are things that are very general, and some of you might still not be 100% sold that it can be possible. Well, I'm here to show you three very inclusive organizations, three examples that show that these are actually possible. All right. So first, a very business sounding company, JP Morgan and Chase. You might imagine that diversity might be the last thing on their minds. But did you know that they have donated over $5 million in support for 5 different causes that uplift members of the LGBTQ community? So what are some of the things that they have shown? Well, first and foremost, they recognize members of the community in their workforce. They have transparent demographics reports and actively seek to increase their numbers of representation from different members of the community. All right. They recognize and fund business resource groups. So the way you can imagine it, it's like a Facebook group, except your requests are listened to by the company. So they have business research groups for people who are transgender, all right, who are gender queer, and basically even other minorities such as racial minorities. All right, and they are recognized officially instead of being just another Facebook group on the web. Right, they actively seek out minority communities, and they have internship programs exclusively for LGBTQIA plus individuals. Just to juxtapose this, they already have a lot of different internship programs for anyone, which usually falls to someone who is heteronormative or not part of the community, LGBTQ community. So to counter this, they have internship programs exclusively for these for members of the community. And then finally, as I've mentioned earlier in my first example, they have active and visible support for LGBTQIA plus causes. So the first one is a bit unexpected, don't you think? JP Morgan and Chase, a very business sounding group, actually having one of the strongest diversity and inclusivity practices in the world currently. So another example is one closer to home, which is Canva, which has offices in Australia and Manila. All right. So they too also have a yearly diversity report. So this shows that they dedicate a significant part of their resources into making diversity stronger inside their company. All right. So they listen to the stories of their employees through Friday stand-ups, wherein people using Canva basically have a PowerPoint presentation about their own story, and they do it around every Friday. So just like the business resource group, Canva has the more casual version, which is social clubs. They call it social clubs, and they have active unconscious bias training, which is a very advanced form of training, because most of our biases we don't even know that we have. So this is some high level psychological application. All right. And then they have gender neutral washrooms, and of course, active and visible support for marriage equality and LGBT pride. The most recent of which was where they had a strong celebration of the 2017 push for domestic partnerships, I think in Australia, if I remember correctly. So they had huge fanfare about it, and they showed that they really supported the community and this push. All right, and this and other examples. All right. So finally, for my last example, is someone that we are very familiar with as well. And IBM, it turns out, have a very interesting history of progressiveness as a technology company. All right. So for example, what are their practices? So in 2020, they are now using big data and using data analytics in order to further reach and strengthen the representation of their workforce uh, who are part of the LGBTQ community. This is called the Self ID program. So they have other projects that are founded from this. So, for example, their IDs will now show people who want to identify as another gender. All right, and it will be recognized in their databases across the world. So, for example, all right. So at the same time, they have active research. They spend a significant amount of their research, of their resources in exploring the lives of people, members of the community when they are at work. All of this can easily be accessible on their website, actually, including their inclusivity and allyship courses. So the picture here is just a small screenshot of their resources. All right. At the same time, they also have all gender washrooms in their physical places. I think they're one of the only, they are one of the few companies that have domestic partner benefits. All right. So, for example, you can assign someone who you can name someone to be your partner regardless of their gender, and IBM recognizes and provides benefits as if you had a heteronormative marriage or a cisgendered marriage. Equal yun for them. It means the same thing. And as early as 1994, so imagine 1994, how difficult times must have been for members of the community. As early as 1994, they already have made policies and statements of support for members of the community. And if you actually go into their website, they have an actual timeline, which goes back as early as, I think, 1970s, which shows their strong history of being progressive when it comes to their inclusivity and diversity. So just to show you, at least on an international level, so these could be different at the local level, all right, IBM Philippines or Canva here at the Philippines, but still, it is possible. We have 3 companies here who have made it big, and a lot more companies that have shown diversity practices. So just to close this, I really want to leave you with the message that an inclusive workplace makes stigma and discrimination go away and replaces it with support. And number 2, that an inclusive and diverse workplace is completely possible. All right. And with that, I hope that I have, energized your imaginations as to how you can make your own organization or your own company more inclusive and diverse. But of course, we also have a few suggestions of our own generated from our own experiences and research. So for part 3, I turn you over to Angelique, who will answer the question, how can we make safe spaces for a diverse community? So Angelique, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for that. Thank you for showing us that it is possible. And even as you describe it, I can imagine myself being in that space. I wonder if our audience here today also imagine that. So we started the conversation with Mibo talking about the different kinds of stigma and discrimination experienced by individuals who are part of the LGBTQIA community. And hearing Ryan talk about the different companies who have made it, who have committed themselves to making their workplaces safe and inclusive to diverse communities, I just feel it also in my body how different it is when you know that the workplace that you're in values you and respects you and affirms you. Maybe just to share something that came to mind as I was listening to Ryan, I remembered an experience in the past. It was after I was married. So I'm married, but I made it a point not to take my husband's last name. And so I went into a bank and I shared with the teller, oh, I'm newly married and things like that. And then she said something like, oh, we have to update your name in our records. We have to call you Mrs. Blank. And I couldn't explain how violating that feels. Now, wait, I'm not like that. So I guess that also shows discrimination and stigma in a way, right? Like, oh, all married women should be like this. All members of the LGBTQ community should be like this. If you're a straight woman, you should be like this. If you're a straight man, you should be like this. Okay. So it's refreshing to hear companies, big names also, who made sure that their employees are safe and are respected. Okay. So for my portion in this webinar, I'd like to help us answer this question or at least think about this question. So it's nice, right? What Ryan shared, but we're asking still this question, how can we do this? How can we make our own communities safe, inclusive, our own workplaces inclusive? And for this afternoon, I'd like to share with you a model that we have in the Gender Hub. So we call this the 4S model of care. And the different components of this model are as follows. So first, starting with story, next, safe space, and finally, support. And in the next few minutes, I'll walk you through this. What do the different components mean? And how can we apply it both at the level of the organization, but also at the level of our individual one-on-one interactions with each other? So again, as mentioned, this is not a space that like really solve it for your organization, but just really to make suggestions towards that. Okay, so beginning with story, this part of the model is a commitment to knowing more about the story of the people in our organization. And as part of that, it is a commitment to not assuming a single story, not assuming that all our workers are like this. All our workers are from this age group because they're not. All our workers are from this demographics because they're not. And because we're focusing on gender, not assuming that all our workers have the same sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, because that is just a very inaccurate assumption to make, unrealistic assumption to make. And when we do that, when we commit ourselves to knowing more about the story, what we're really doing is we're allowing for multiple stories to come up, for multiple viewpoints to come up. And we're also allowing ourselves to address those different stories, those different viewpoints. And what we're really doing is we're being inclusive. What are the other stories here? The other stories that maybe we're not paying attention to when we just focus on the main storyline, for instance, of people being cisgender, right? Meaning their gender assigned at birth matches their gender identity. That's not true for some people, right? Or we're also not assuming that the people are heterosexual, okay? Meaning our female co-worker must be attracted to men, right? That's not necessarily true. Okay. So how can this be applied in the workplace? Okay, here are some suggestions. So we can do this by, as mentioned by Ryan a while ago, by doing diversity reports. So what it means is that reporting data in a disaggregated way, meaning not clumping up together pieces of information, but instead presenting them in disaggregates. For instance, unpacking them according to age and understanding your employees that way, or unpacking it in terms of gender, unpacking it in terms of demographics and things like that. Second, when we provide avenues for voluntary self-identification in the data that we are collecting. Okay? Third, when we include LGBTQIA plus concerns, gender concerns and issues also when we do our training and when we do our strategic planning. Fourth, when we review the policies that we have in the workplace that carry cisgender and heteronormative assumptions or maybe stereotypes about individuals. And finally, when we hold conversations that allow individuals to share their personal context when they would like to share it, when they are comfortable sharing that. Okay. Next, okay. So here are some questions that I would like to leave you with, okay, so that you could continue this reflection on how can you apply this part of the model in your own workplace. So some things that you could ask yourself or maybe ask your colleagues, ask each other, your employees too, okay? What assumptions or generalizations am I making or are we making about the individuals in our organization? Okay, taking time to reflect on that. And then another question you could ask is, how can we make our organization more sensitive to the different stories here, to the different individual stories? Okay. Next aspect of the model is the safe space. So we are able to give individuals a safe space when we are non-judgmental, when we are accepting, when we are affirming that any SOGI, any sexual orientation, any gender identity, and any gender expression is psychologically, socially, and morally acceptable and valid. When we use gender-sensitive language, okay? Interestingly, maybe just to share with you, the American Psychological Association, APA, has accepted the use of they, them to refer to a singular person in instances where you don't know maybe with the person's preferred pronouns or the person's pronouns. Okay? And then using correct names and pronouns to refer to our workmates. So some strategies here, when we go back on-site, or maybe some of you are working on-site, this could be implemented, having a gender neutral or an all-gender washroom. Okay? Imagine feeling unsafe to go to the bathroom, right? I mean, that's a human right? Being able to take care of yourself that way. Second, having clear mechanisms, and not only that, but also having safe mechanisms for reporting gender-based harassment and discrimination. Okay. Next is doing regular gender sensitivity trainings. Next, checking for gender bias in the forms that we use in our workplace, in our assessments, in the assessments that we conduct. Okay. Imagine how distressing it could feel for individuals if the only boxes that they're allowed to tick is male or female, right? And they know that they're neither of that. And then finally, in our personal interactions, respecting boundaries. Okay. So here are some questions that I would like to pose. Okay. Asking yourself, asking each other, who are we making safe with this protocol, with this project, with this program in our workplace? And at the same time, also reflecting, is it possible that we are making someone unsafe when we do this? Okay. And then moving on into the final component of this model, the last S stands for support. And we are able to make the environment supportive when we allow for connections to be built, when we facilitate conversations, when we hold supportive social spaces, and when we provide mental health support and resources. As mentioned by Mibo a while ago, individuals in the LGBTQIA plus community often experience that they are denied care, right? So we counter that in our workplace when we do this. So here are some strategies. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, there. So hosting peer support groups, allowing employees to meet with each other and support with each other in a way that makes them feel comfortable. Maybe also assigning a gender focal person who can be the one to lobby concerns or rights of LGBTQIA individuals in the workplace. Third, providing benefits that are sensitive to LGBTQIA plus concerns. And finally, having workshops and webinars like this related to gender and other gender related concerns. And here are some questions that I can pose. Asking yourself, asking each other, what forms of support am I providing? What forms of support am I not providing? Okay. So again, giving you the 4S model of care to help you in establishing an inclusive, diverse workplace. Story, safe space, and support. Okay. And at this point, I'd like to hear from you. So again, going to our mentee and responding to this question, what strategies would you like to see in your workplace? Okay, so you can go to mentee.com, put in the code 61750080, or maybe if you're having difficulties, you can type it on the chat box and we'll read it. Okay, so again, the question is, what strategies would you like to see in your workplace?
So while people are, I guess, trying to gather their thoughts also, I think we can start asking ourselves, Rin, I think I started asking myself, I guess, how I've been able to support people within the workplace. I mean, understandably, Positive Workplaces is holding the workshop series because we really want people to feel something concrete happening. But how then do you feel like, to any of the speakers, will we be able to do that given that we're in the online setting right now? Have you seen specific strategies that have really helped? Maybe while people are answering the mentee.
Okay, siguro to start, parang this online platform forces us to be creative in what we do. Siguro one way that we can show support to the community is first respecting pronouns. You can have that parang as somehow respecting, kasi yung iba, they would put it in their email signatures, diba, their pronouns, or even during meetings. For example, here Ryan, he has his pronouns beside his name. And yeah, I think just the mere fact of respecting pronouns. So some people might think that pronouns lang naman yun, it would not matter. But for some people, especially who, ano ba, nasa outside of the typical gender, when it's really important. Yeah.
Thank you,
That's-
Mibo. How about Thank you, Mibo. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Sorry if I cut you off.
So I would like to ask siguro Angelique or Ryan if they have any suggestions too.
Okay. For me, what I noticed works in this online setup and something that I'm also reading no, in the word cloud that's being formed is having that avenue for story sharing. Okay. That's important, especially in a time like this where we could all feel so disconnected and so far away from each other. So sometimes it could be like through Zoom, you and your workmates, right? No higher ups there, and just you by yourself facilitating conversations. Or maybe you asking the help of an external service provider that could do that for you. Um, Especially during a time like this where maybe some individuals who are part of the community are in homes that are not necessarily accepting of them, right? And maybe that sense of safety is something that they feel with their workmates, right? But now that's challenged by the pandemic. And so it's important to continue that, to still have that online. So despite your own home situation, maybe you still know that, oh, I am safe with somebody.
Hello. For me, and this might be a bit I don't know, spicy or something like that. Pero I think one of the more crucial things that need to be looked into is the proper time management, no? So for example, as a company, we all have to agree that after a certain hour, absolutely no more work. Why? Kasi in this pandemic, in this online context, naghahalo-halo na lahat. And you might think that it might affect everyone equally, but the truth is it would not. All right, because some people, for example, will have doctors appointments that they have scheduled months in advance just to be safe. Pero dahil nag-OT sila bigla, okay, they can't go anymore. There are single parents, both male and female and other genders, who are taking care of their kids. Pero pag nag-OT, of course, yon. So one of the most effective things would be just to, as a group, regardless of department or company or org, just say, okay, after this, absolutely close na tayo. Okay, let's all just agree to say na let's just continue the next day. And that will definitely benefit everyone, regardless of gender. The second one, of course, is something that we're doing right now. All right, and it's very accessible, which is this will be some kind of gender sensitivity training. And look at this, no? In a physical face-to-face setting, we would not be able to easily reach 111 participants. Ang dami pa nun, there's a lot of space, logistics for the physical space, the seating, and then everyone has to take transpo. And yet, we see here, we innovate, we adapt, we thrive to a certain extent because of these practices, and in such a way that is beneficial to gender sensitivity and making more inclusive workplace. So the two things, one is time management policy for the pandemic setting. Second one is basically gender sensitivity training that is online and reaches a lot of people. So yeah, that's it for me.
So I guess I can also pass it back to Ma'am Angelique if there's anything else she'd like to process with what's being shown on the screen right now.
Okay. Something that maybe I'll just read through it. Okay. So the big words that are coming up right now would be gender sensitivity training. So thank you, Positive Workplace, for giving training like this, because it looks like people really want this. Having a gender focal person. So it's nice to see that people pick that up. Having support groups, gender sensitive policies, gender sensitive forms. Yes, people might think, oh, it's just a form. What harm would that do, right? And I'm thinking, if it's just a form, why not fix it if it's just a form, right? Yeah. Safe restroom. Yes, please. Okay, that's it. Chloe, do you want to facilitate Q&A?
Okay, so right now we'll start opening the floor to some questions you guys would like to ask. I understand that it's quite a sensitive topic to handle, so you can actually privately message me your questions, or any of our speakers actually, or any of the people who have PW Tech Support beside their name, and you can start forwarding questions right now. So I'll just give you some time to think about it, but then I personally had some questions that came to mind, especially as Mibo was presenting his part on the levels of rejection that they experience. How then do you feel like, as someone who, if I'm, let's pretend I'm an individual who is experiencing that type of rejection, how can I then cope with that individually? I understand that, having great support systems is very important, but a lot of the time we can feel so alone in the experience. How can I enable myself to have that confidence to encourage myself to keep moving forward despite that rejection?
That's actually a good and yet a tricky question.
Yes.
Diba? Because some people would say na, oh, you can just ignore what everyone is saying, just as long as you know who you are deep inside. But then again, how can you be comfortable with yourself when everyone else is trying to, I don't know, demean you or reject you? Well, siguro, parang kuha na lang from personal experience, because I believe we all have our unique ways of approaching such scenario. What helped me in my journey is, first, yes, having the right support group, For example, here, the Loyola Gender Hub, having people that I can trust to talk about my experiences and such, and having people that can validate me no matter what I present to them. Yeah. Yeah. How about Angelique and Ryan? Any thoughts regarding such question? And siguro, as I see clients then having solely-related cases, it's really hard to figure out how to cope with such scenario, especially if you feel so alone, and especially if you feel like people are not there to support you during stressful times. Yeah, hence the avoidance coping that I talked about earlier today. Siguro a straight answer is to really have a good social support group. And one way that parang a workplace can do that, as Ryan mentioned, is to educate ourselves through having this kind of trainings and etc. Yeah.
So I've actually forwarded another question that came privately
Yeah.
to our speaker.
Sige.
It's kind of
I could,
similar to the first one. But we can
sige,
probably-
perhaps I could read it. How do you respond to the different forms of rejection? Wait. Rejection in a way that is safe to your context, in a way that doesn't mean staying silent. But siguro for me, I choose my battles. Diba? Kasi it can be tiring to always explain myself to other people who, for some people kasi they ask to understand, and for others they ask to, I don't know, kumbaga na understand. So yeah, just really trying to choose my battles and choose to whom I would exert energy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How about ma'am and sir? Maybe there's like some experiences that you've encountered also through the stories you've heard. What do you feel like are best practices they've been doing in order to respond to that kind of situation?
Um, so the question is, let me just read the question again. How do you respond to the different forms of rejection in a way that is safe to your context, in a way that doesn't mean staying silent? And kind of similar to what Mibo said, so choosing your battles, but in the individuals that I help through counseling sessions, it's validation is the first step, really, because individuals come to me and they feel like, oh, this is my fault, or oh, I'm so unlikable because I'm like this, because that's what the environment has made them feel. When we choose the battles, what we do is we evaluate, um, what will it do to you if you stay silent? Will that help? Would you like that? Or will it not help? What would it do for you if you speak up? Would you like that? Will that help? And usually in cases like this, what we're really trying to do is for individuals not to see it as black or white, that it's either I would shut myself up or I would speak up. Okay? But what we do when we help them is we expand that. Okay? What are the other choices maybe? Other choices so you don't feel like it's lose-lose, right? What's a win for you? What's also very important when we talk about rejection and invalidation is we tap into social support. It's good that they're coming to us for individual help, but what really helps would be peers who are accepting, significant others who are accepting, family members who are not rejecting them. Maybe a tita who's understanding, a cousin who loves them, a younger brother who looks up to them regardless of their gender identity. Maybe just to share with you one story of a client who feels super rejected by his family, but he has a great relationship with his younger brother who calls him Kuya, who recognizes that his gender identity is male.
It kind of makes me want to cry a little. A bit like it's amazing. No, maybe sir, if there's nothing you'd like to add to that, I can also bring up other questions. Do you feel comfortable answering that question as well.
Okay, siguro I could read it. I think the same somehow in questions. At what age should you nurture gender sensitivity with children? How can you guide them to be more responsible, productive people and be confident with their gender identity? So a lot of researchers would say na at age 4 or 5 may strong sense na of gender. So I would say na as early talaga, try to be open the discussion. Kasi our early experiences, diba, would serve as a model for our future ones. So, yeah, there.
I guess also the next question is kind of related to that in terms of being an educator. No, I guess all of you work in the academe setting. You're within Ateneo right now. When then should you provide actual gender sensitivity training to students? I feel like there's arguing points that at what point it's best to start introducing this context. Mibo said the discussion starts even at a young age, but then when do we start diving deeper into the topic concretely?
Hello. Okay, so I want to give my thoughts on these, no, on the basis on the questions regarding the education and gender sensitivity. When do you teach it? Okay, so when we think of gender sensitivity training, no, I'm pretty sure we think that there's only really one way to go about it. Na parang, oh, we have to teach everyone Soji. We have everyone regardless of their age or where they come from. We have to teach them automatically all of these things, the gender unicorn, and at the same time. But even in psychologists, as a psychologist, we recognize that the minds of children developmentally have different focuses, I guess, different focus per age group. And some approaches to gender sensitivity training will be more appropriate for other ages than others. All right. So what would look like for GST or gender sensitivity education for younger education would be something just as simple as making them aware that people come in all shapes and sizes. It doesn't have to be super technical all of a sudden about X, Y, chromosome, and hormones and all of that. But just being aware that you are different from your classmate and the classmate is different from the teacher. And regardless of who they all are worthy of respect. So as you can see, it's very concrete. It focuses on features and appearances, but it connects to that very core principle that we ourselves are discussing today, which is diversity needs to be recognized. And in this diversity, people need to be inclusive. It comes back to that simple question. So I guess just to summarize what I'm sharing here, you have to be aware of the developmental stage of your audience, and then simply apply the principles that we have been teaching here in such a way that is appropriate. But to really just put down an answer to the question, for me, as even as early as age 4, all right, I personally think it's already appropriate, except you have to really think of the content. And in this case, it's really just accepting that or making your student aware that people come in all shapes and sizes and mindsets, and you know they all deserve respect. Ayun, that's already appropriate for that age. That's just my own thoughts. Maybe Angelique and Mibo can add.
Okay. I'd like to add to that if that's okay. But before I respond, parang talagang acknowledging first that I have so many thoughts on that topic, and so what I'm saying might seem scattered, but I'll try my best today for it to make sense. Okay. When we talk about gender and educating individuals, children about gender, I want you to know that we do that, but sometimes we're not aware of it. Sometimes the gender education that we impart are not, we don't sit our children down on our laps and say, oh, this is a boy, this is a girl, right? It comes out in our interactions with them, in the media that they consume, in what in the comments that they hear us saying about other people. And so I'm thinking when it comes to gender sensitivity, it's about that too. Like asking yourself, what are the things that my children watch? Right? What are the materials that I show to my students? Is it inclusive? Right? Mm, so I'm thinking parang it's not more about like when do we do it because we're actually doing it, but more of like, okay, I'm doing this. Is this practice inclusive? Is this practice diverse? Right? Is it accounting for diversity? Is it sensitive? For instance, we assume that okay, all girls like pink. Okay, and that comes out when we know that oh, our friend has given birth recently and it's a boy, and so I'm gonna buy a blue thing, right? Catching yourself, why not buy a green thing or a purple thing? Okay, that for me is like a diverse practice, an inclusive practice, right? Hmm. And for instance, when we talk about the body parts, like when do you teach your child his or her or their body parts, right? Making sure that you use the right terminologies, for instance, making sure that you expose them to appropriate storybooks, for instance. When we go to health classes, for instance, at grade 4, 5, or 6, who do we talk about? We're just talking about males and females, right? Why is it like that? Can we talk about the spectrum of experiences? When we talk about contraception in our classrooms, right? Why are we assuming that it's like heteronormative sexuality, right? Okay. I think that's it for me.
Mibo, would you like to add anything to that also?
Good, just to summarize what Ryan and Angelique parang had said, parang before you can educate others,
Yeah.
first you have to be parang educate yourself. Be aware of your own biases and how you think about things. And we are not only connected to our children, for example, we are also connected to other people. And one way that we can teach children or our children to be respectful, to be inclusive, is us being respectful and inclusive to others as well.
It's very true. I think no, I guess we forget
Sorry,
to
Chloe.
check. Yeah, go on.
Yes, sorry.
Ma'am.
Can I add to that quickly lang?
Yes.
And as adults, I know that sometimes we're not so sure about how to do things, and it's okay that you're not sure, and it's okay to ask for help. Talking to parents, they usually they rarely come from a place of bad intention. It's usually just because they're scared, they don't know what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you look at it, what all of our speakers have shared right now, it's really also about keeping ourselves in check. That's why I'd actually like to congratulate everyone for attending this. It's already step one towards being more aware about how we've been behaving. I think we have the tendency to believe that no, here in the Philippines things are a lot safer. We have like that specific assumption for a lot of people. Or some people might feel I might as well not say anything and not cause any, like, let's not shake the boat. But then maybe also if we want to be effective as supporters, we have to keep ourselves in check regularly. Maybe even ask feedback from the people in your community, how they feel like around you. Maybe there are some habits that you've been doing that actually don't make them feel safe. Sometimes you have to be the one to start the conversation. Like a while ago, they mentioned sharing stories. And it might be difficult to start from their end. So maybe you can even reach out first and start those conversations. And that kind of relates to one of the questions we have here. What are your thoughts then on dress codes in schools or workplaces that aren't very inclusive? And especially the next one, it's how do I then deal with people who aren't as open-minded about the topic in general? So loaded two questions. How do you feel about dress codes in places that aren't very inclusive, and how do we then respond to those people when it comes to the topic of gender diversity? Feel free to unmute once you have an answer in mind.
Hello. I will. This was actually a question that was asked before,
Mhm.
and in during one of our GSTs, no, both of these are actually questions that have been asked before. And both cases, it just so happened to be that it was our director, the director of the Loyola Schools Gender Hub, Dr. Mira Ferneo, who answered. No, so what I will do is I will channel her answer. I will channel her, Dr. Ofreneo, and give her response. No, and for us, it will always be, for example, first, does the organization or the school have a gender focal person, or an organizations, or an organization that, you know um, that strives to nurture gender sensitivity in the organization. So with that in mind, the answer is always, it will need to be, um, a source, or it will need to be a location of constant dialogue.
Mhm.
All right, but of course, the push is, eventually, to make, to make these individuals and these policies be a point for reflection, no? Kasi what needs to be surfaced is, what are the assumptions about gender that underscore these policies or these mindsets, right? There needs to be a certain reflection. So for example, no, um, in that dialogue, somehow there needs to be, even whether during the dialogue or after a dialogue, there needs to be a point where the policymakers or these people in general will think, why am I enforcing, or this certain belief, this certain approach? All right. So it's not necessarily automatically saying no. You have to get rid of that. You have to, because the change has to be internal talaga. So for
Mm.
example, apply, because this is the question, no? Apply to the cross-dressing, policy, no? So what are the assumptions under cross-dressing that policymakers have? All right. So I don't have an answer for that, because I'm not a policymaker who says, cross-dressing is a, should, should not be allowed. All right. But what are the assumptions underneath cross-dressing, and its prohibition? With regards to the development of a person, what are you saying about gender if you do not allow a person to cross-dress? Do you believe something will happen to the person, or something will not happen to a person? And the answers that will emerge from there need to be the basis of whether or not, cross-dressing is or is not allowed in that case. That's pretty much the only answer that I can give. Because as um an organization that nurtures gender sensitivity, we do have a stand, of course. But any change that has to happen to an organization, a school, or group of people has to come from them and their own reflection. The furthest that we can do is continuously dialogue. Rest a bit when we're so tired of dialoguing, and then go again. That's the best that we can do. Of course, my colleagues here can also answer the question. But that's my thoughts on the matter.
My thoughts, me as a person, I'll respond to that first, me as a person, and then me as maybe like a more professional answer. But um, recognizing also, I guess, my point of privilege that I'm a woman at this time, and I can wear a dress when I want to. I can choose to wear pants when I don't want to wear a dress, and that freedom. And I just wish that everyone had that to wear what they want to wear. That's my personal response to how do I feel about that. My more professional response, I guess, is going back to the 4S model of care, right? First, the story. When the dress code policy was created, maybe it's coming from a different storyline, right? Maybe during that time, stories were different. But now at this time, stories are more diverse. And there must be a particular storyline that maybe we're not paying attention to when we enforce that, right?
Mhm.
And for policymakers to, again, what Ryan was saying, to reflect. Now that the storyline is made aware to us, What do we choose to do with it? Do we ignore it? Do we silence it? Do we listen to it? Do we make adjustments?
Yeah, and I also want to acknowledge that change can be a slow process. As Ryan mentioned, we need to have like a continuous dialogue about it. And by doing so, we perhaps deepen our understanding of such issues and to know is the kind of clothes that we're trying to make these people wear really the problem or is it something else? And by being aware of that, and as Angelique mentioned, then what do we do now by having this awareness? Do we let it stay with awareness lang, or perhaps we need to tie it up with action? Yeah.
Okay. I guess that's all the time we have for questions, but then there's an interesting point here. I guess a practice that Mr. Haven, I'm not really sure what your pronouns are right now, but she said or he said that siguro to have an in-house behavior specialist in every workplace, and I hope the government will realize how important it is to everyone, especially in these trying times. Yeah, no, so Gender Hub started how many years ago? I think it was just a year or 3 ago. Yeah, and 2. And I guess I've also been so lucky to be part of an institution that actually institutionalized a space like that for people. And I hope in the future it will be a norm that exists, that everyone will have that space. And I appreciate our 3 speakers today actually providing that platform, that it shows them that this is something realistic that can happen. Like I said before, it's when we show people that kindness and compassion are things that can be organized, that can be institutionalized. It's not an idealistic thing. It's something we can actually make happen. So just to wrap things up, I think I'd just like to thank our speakers also. We've tackled so many things today. We've tackled why is it important to have safe and inclusive workplaces? What does it look like in an inclusive workplace? And we've even given you concrete ways that you can start the conversation on how we can make safe spaces for diverse communities. I'd like to thank our 3 speakers for today. So we'll just be showing a certificate of appreciation for Mibo Borres, to Ryan Camacho, and to Ma'am Angelique Villasanta. Thank you so much for actually saying yes to this. I'm so happy we've been able to collaborate during this time. I really wouldn't have expected that we would ever have this sort of interaction. Now that the pandemic has happened, like what Sir said, this is really an opportunity that has opened for all of us to get this kind of training. And for those who have attended from their workplaces, we're going to be uploading this session later on. Maybe you can link that to your workmates or your friends later on. But here are just some activities that LS Gender Hub will be having this month to celebrate Pride Month in 2021. We have specific dates here. So today they joined us to have this webinar in partnership with us. They will also be having some for the rest of the month until July, even extending further. So Rose will be sending right now a link to their Facebook page in case you're interested in some of the other opportunities you might have with them. So Rose, if you can just send the link in a little bit. And then there, so it's in the chat right now. Aside from that, if you guys enjoyed this session today, we have one more thing here. We have an adaptive leadership course that you have 2 weeks left to register. The link will also be sent in the chat box. If you'd like to learn more about leadership, it will be headed by Coach Lippy, a certified transformative coach under Gallup Strengths. We will also be having one last webinar to cap off the series on for Pride Month, which is navigating mental health in the workplace for inclusivity. The registration will also be sent below. So for the first one, it's this slide. So navigating mental health, it will be on a Saturday. So for all the people who clamored in the chat box saying, can you please hold one out of office hours? Please attend this because this is your chance to really join us already and get, I guess, a certificate for that. We are also already on Instagram. We formally launched. So you can follow us there and you'll be able to see the different posts that we have. We currently have 329 followers. If you help us, we can get more. We've also added more resources to our page. So we'll also forward our website. You'll be able to find the webinars that we previously had. And you can even access others through our YouTube. We're now on YouTube also. So we just hit 100 recently. Hopefully you can join us. Look for youtube.com/positive workplaces. We have other webinars. If you weren't able to attend the one last week, we had one on workplace inclusion in the new normal. And please just follow us on Positive Workplaces as well on Facebook for more updates. While our team sends the evaluation form below, maybe if there's any closing words or speakers would like to share before we end the session. So, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, siguro, I do acknowledge that we talk about a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not really that easy to understand, especially those terminologies. But I hope that this session can somehow start the process of awareness, of understanding, so that again we could create a safe space for sensitivity and diversity. Okay.
Hello. Basically, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. You being here is already a good sign, just a very good sign, no? That we are connecting more and more each other, and all of us here today are connected by the fact that, to varying degrees, we do recognize that, well, everyone deserves respect and everyone deserves support, not exactly despite who they are, but exactly for who they are. All right. And if we were just to summarize everything here, it's that, well, diversity and inclusivity everywhere, it's basically possible. And I hope everyone keeps that in mind. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank everyone too for being in this space with us. Your questions suggest to me that like how important you feel this is, and I'm glad that you do feel that way. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for this.
Thank you. So I'd like also to empower the three of you to continue doing the work that you do. It is important. You are trailblazing something that not all places might be able to do. Maybe in the future, you can even enable other organizations to create structures like this. I guess also if there's anyone who'd like more information regarding their trainings, or I guess other services, or maybe even just personal advice regarding what you can do with your organizations, I think you can try reaching them through their Facebook page, which was previously sent. So I think we'll be sending right now. So Gender LS Hub at ateneo.edu. You can contact them there as well. For our post evaluations, it will be sent right now by Rose. So please make sure you write your full name on the evaluation form so that you will automatically get the certificate at the end. Also, it will only be open for 30 minutes after the session. So please, I'll just keep this on right now. And that's the end of the talk today. So sorry for extending, but then as you can see, everyone's so engaged with the topic. They've stayed even beyond the time, which is so good. I'm super happy about today's session. I feel like it was even a safe space because everyone was able to, I guess, ask questions that could have been quite sensitive in other instances, but because they felt safe here with the environment that you've set, the three speakers have set, it really will make a difference, I guess, in someone's day. It might be just this 1 hour, 30-minute session that you got this support. But if at any point anybody feels like they need additional support after this talk, please do email us or message Gender LS Hub. Maybe we can link you to other support systems that you can get more additional help if that would be necessary. So yeah, that's all. So I'll just play some music right now, or if anybody would like to take a photo, maybe we can take a photo with everyone right now. Let's just take a photo right now. How do I remove spotlight? So Kurt or Rose, can you assist me in taking a photo? So if you can please open your cameras, and then hopefully, we can see your beautiful faces. For today, let's just make this memory real. so that we would forget that this happened. Sometimes the best way to do that is on photos. So can somebody help me from the team to take a screenshot of this? Can you message me if you
I
can?
can do it, Chloe.
Thanks, Nikki. So we have 5 panels, 5 panels. So just maintain your smile because we don't know which one you're on. So
All
let's
right, smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay, 2 more panels. 1, 2, 3. And one last. 1, 2, 3. There you go. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you,
Thank
Mibo,
you.
Ryan, and Angelique. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Chloe and Nikki and Positive Workplaces. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So we'll just play some music while we're waiting for everyone to leave the room. So just you can continue to access the evaluation form here. You may leave the call already. Thank you, everybody. Okay, we'll be closing the room right now. I hope everyone was able to access the evaluation form to acquire your certificate. I'll just send it again one last time. And we'll close the room right now. Keep safe, everyone. I hope you have a good day and the good rest of the week. Bye-bye. Thank you for attending.